Welcome back, everyone. Tonight is going to be the last of our rankings for the preseason. I know you're as excited as I am. We're going to talk about the top 20 defenses you should be targeting. Now, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be the best every week. If you listen to the show week to week, then you'll find out who I think the best targets are going to be. If you've got a couple of defenses, you're playing best ball or something, try to pair up a couple of defenses that have different bye weeks, different schedules, teams that target weak teams like New Orleans, Carolina, or teams that give up a lot of points like Cincinnati, those kinds of things. If you're playing best ball or you've got two defenses in your league, or you're just looking for a bye week replacement, target those guys. All right, before we jump in, remember, when we're talking about defenses, at best, the differential between 1, 2, and 3 is 20 points each step. After that, it's like a 10-point differential. There's so many defenses that are actually tied at the same points per game in each different step. So if you're looking at the defenses between like 5 and 15, or 5 even and 20, it's really who you're the most comfortable with. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm higher on a couple of defenses than a lot of guys are out there. I'll tell you why when we get into the breakdown, but it'll make sense, hopefully. Defenses change drastically from year to year, draft, free agency, all those kinds of things. So just because one team did really great last year doesn't mean they're going to be great this year. And last, one of the big question marks for defenses is the number of turnovers. Sacks from year to year are normally consistent. So if you're drafting guys like the Denver Broncos, who lead in the total number of sacks, and they don't lose anybody, they're probably going to have a similar season. But when it comes to interceptions, fumble recoveries, yes, personnel matter, but sometimes those bounces just go one way or another. Like last year, Green Bay was number 4 overall. When it came to turnovers, they were huge with 31 total turnovers. That didn't lead the NFL, but it was like top 5. The big picture there is the rest of their defense is terrible, and we'll talk about them. All right, we'll make it quick tonight. Let's jump right in. The first team overall I have is Denver. Now, that means they would be repeating from last year. I'm not necessarily sure that they're going to repeat from last year, but this is the number one defense that I want. They have a great schedule. They've got a good returning unit. Mims is injured. That's an issue because he likes to do punt returns and kick returns, and that could be an issue, an extra touchdown here or there maybe. The chances of them going back-to-back as the number one defense are pretty small, and they're not necessarily worth the ADP that are the number one defense coming off the board. But if I have Denver, I'm feeling pretty comfortable. Number 2, I have Buffalo. They were number 3 last year. They drafted all defense this year. Crazy. So they obviously know where they needed to go. Paying that kind of attention to it, that's going to make them a top 5 defense this year. And I have them at number 2. They have a top 5 strength of schedule, and they're good at getting turnovers. And number 3, I have Pittsburgh. I mean, when you've got Watt on one side, he's forcing turnovers all over the ball. It's tough to play in Pittsburgh. They have a decent schedule. They upgraded their secondary. This is a no-brainer for number 3. And number 4, I have Baltimore. They had a rough year last year. It's a tough place to play. They have a decent schedule. Teams play from behind against Baltimore, and that means they're going to turn over the ball more trying to score. They got one of the top safeties in the draft. I think things are going to be a reversal from last year. At number 5, I have the Houston Texans. Not really surprised. They did really well last year. They were a top 6 defense. Now they added CJ Gardner-Johnson. Their schedule looks pretty decent. They play Carolina. That's a big deal. Obviously, they're going to be able to stop them and get some turnovers. So I like Houston at 5. At number 6, I have the Minnesota Vikings. Now, on paper, they don't look that awesome, but for some odd reason, they force pressure, they force turnovers, and it's tough to play in Minnesota. They were number 2 last year. I don't think they can repeat that. I think a lot of turnovers went their way. But if they continue to get pressure on the quarterback, they'll continue to get turnovers, and that's why I like them at 6. At number 7, I have an up-and-comer, Seattle. Now, last year they were 8, so not a big move for them, but they have a good schedule, had a decent draft, and I can see them moving up. You know, they got a better quarterback, or at least not necessarily a better quarterback, but probably an offense that's going to score a little bit more and put the defense on the other team on their heels and make the other team push the ball, which equals turnovers. At number 8, I have the Jets. Now, this is a big, big move. Last year, the Jets were terrible. What do they get? In my opinion, the best defensive coordinator, now the head coach, in the NFL. And that means their defense is going to be ultimately better. They have arguably the top corner. He's going to get a couple of picks this year. I think they're going to get pressure. They're going to run some schemes that people haven't seen before. They're probably going to run the ball more. They're going to have a little bit more ball control. And that means less scoring for the other team and more turnovers for them. And oh, by the way, they have a top 5 schedule. At number 9, I have the Chargers. Last year, they were number 9, so not a shocker here. They have a top 5 schedule. Tough start, though, obviously, going to Brazil. But I think they're going to create more turnovers this year. They're going to be able to score more points, and that equals probably more turnovers on the other team trying to catch them. At number 10, I have San Francisco. This is not going to be a top pick by a lot of people. I know this is going to surprise. They were like a bottom third defense last year, but they had an amazing draft, in my opinion. Number one schedule out there, the number one schedule, strength of schedule. I think that helps them. And they're going to have a ball control offense. Right now, they don't have a whole lot of wide receivers to throw to. So I think it's going to be short passes. CMC, if he's healthy, they run the ball more. And of course, it's tough to win in San Francisco. At number 11, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. Super Bowl champs. They were a top 5 defense or top 6 defense last year. However, there's going to be some regression. As there always is with Super Bowl champs, people leave, they go get more money, coaches change, there's some differences. Their schedule's terrible this year. That all equals a drop, but they're still a strong unit at number 11. At number 12, I have the Detroit Lions. Yes, the loss of their defensive coordinator is huge, but they have the personnel to finish here at 12. They have a really tough schedule. They're going to create a lot of pressure, I hope, if they can stay healthy, but that's really the big question mark for Detroit, isn't it? If they can stay healthy, they finish in the top 10. At number 13, I have Kansas City. Man, I can't tell you, I can't even think of a worse place to try to go into and win, especially in the winter. They're always competitive. That's why I have them here. Their schedule isn't the greatest, but KC always seems to win tough games, especially at home. At number 14, I have Atlanta. This is crazy, right? But they had an outstanding draft. They went 3 defensive players in the first 3 rounds. They're going to have more success on the offense. That's going to drive their opponents to try to push the ball more. I think it creates more turnovers. They have a really good schedule. All the pieces are in place for them to just rock it this year. At number 15, I have Arizona. They had another amazing draft. They're starting hot up against New Orleans. That's a great, week 1 target. They have an excellent schedule. I think Arizona turns it around this year. At number 16, I have the Pats. New England's always tough. I don't know why. Their offense is going to be just amazingly better this year. I think they're going to be a top 15 offense. That translates into more points. That means their opponents have to push the ball more. Again, you've heard me say it, more turnovers. This is going to be a huge move for them. Last year, they were number 31. I know a lot of people aren't going to agree with this, but I like it. And they have a really good schedule too. At number 17, I have Chicago. Chicago's always tough at home. They have the weather. Their schedule's just not that great. They have to play Detroit. They have to play Green Bay. They have to play Minnesota. But Chicago, for some odd reason, always plays tough. Don't count them out. At number 18, I have Green Bay. And this is the team that finished 4 overall last year. This is a big deal. Turnovers can be fluky. I think in this year, they're going to have a rough one. Now, there's talk that they might get Micah Parsons. If that happens, push them up another 6 spots to probably 12, maybe even 11. At number 19, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. This isn't that big of a surprise. Actually, they finished number 12 last year. And they added a pass rusher in Stewart. He even likes to hit Burrow at practice. Probably not the best thing if I were you, buddy. Unfortunately, I think they pull back a little bit this year. I think their defense is going to be worse. They're going to score a lot of points. I think a lot of people are going to push the ball against them, but they don't really have the ability to create turnovers. Yes, they got Hendrickson. So Stewart Hendrickson could create some havoc in the pocket, but right now I'm just not seeing a lot of positive things out of Cincinnati defensively. And then last but not least, the Bucks. They're going to face New Orleans and Carolina twice on their schedule. I mean, how can you argue with that? They're great at home, and they're going to push for the playoffs. I'm trying not to make it too complicated here. Okay, and that rounds out the top 20 defenses. And that's our last of the rankings preseason. Now listen up, before the actual week 1 starts, I might have an update on some of the numbers out there. I'll even give you an update right now. Cade Otton's hurt. He's probably not going to play in week 1, which means he's going to drop a couple of spots, probably about 13 or 14. And that'll move Henry up to number 10. All right, as always, before we end the show, I'm going to give a shout out to the men and women in uniform who protect the freedoms that we hold dear. Thank you for your service and sacrifice. And thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe on X, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you can stay up to date on our latest content. And until then, remember, established dominance isn't just a catchphrase, it's a commitment. Are you ready?